There is a glitch in the high achiever's brain. The moment a goal becomes attainable, we stop feeling relief and start feeling suspicion. We call it due diligence, but psychologists call it the effort heuristic, our dangerous tendency to mistake difficulty for value.
That instinct wasn't invented by psychology departments. For most of human history, effort and survival were the same thing: food, shelter, safety. None of it arrived without physical cost. The nervous system learned the question early: no struggle, no reward. It was accurate for a long time. Then the Industrial Revolution converted that instinct into ideology. Output became a moral virtue endorsed by economists, built into working schedules, ratified by religious frameworks that treated idleness as a spiritual failure. Workers were evaluated not just by what they produced, but by how that visibly they strained to produce it. Suffering in that context was the credential. The language that era left behind is still in circulation. Hard earned, paying your dues, nothing worth having comes easy. They sound like wisdom. They function as inherited instructions about how success is supposed to feel. And those instructions are still running quietly in the background whenever something arrives without sufficient difficulty attached to it.
So when a goal starts to feel attainable, when the path looks clearer than expected, the mind doesn't register relief, it registers suspicion. And the response, usually without any conscious decision, is to add complexity back. Timelines, contingency plans, research phases that never quite resolve into action. From the outset, that looks like rigor. From the inside, if you're honest, it functions as insulation. Simplicity exposes you directly to the possibility of receiving what you want quickly without the accumulated suffering that would justify it. That exposure is more confronting than it sounds. A clear, undefended desire is a real commitment. It removes the conditions under which failure stays abstract. So the mind builds structure around it, not to get there faster, but to preserve a layer of distance between the wanting and the having. The elaboration that surrounds most goals isn't planning, it's distance management dressed as diligence.
There's a study that makes this concrete. Participants who endured an unpleasant initiation to join a group rated that group significantly more highly than those who joined without difficulty. Their minds adjusted to their beliefs to match the investment. They decided the suffering must have pointed towards something real. The same mechanism runs through personal development. A slow, exhausting process feels credible. Something that starts working before you paid enough, the mind, it distrusts it. Not because anything is wrong, because it has no story to explain the ease. The pattern scales. A team works towards something for years. Momentum builds. Obstacles that were solid start clearing. The rational response is to let it run. Instead, someone calls a strategy review. A new layer gets introduced. The complexity that wasn't needed before gets added back. Not because the work requires it, but because ease at that velocity registers as negligence. The difficulty gets restored because difficulty is what serious work is supposed to feel like.
Underneath all of it is an identity question that rarely gets examined directly. A lot of us have built a sense of self around endurance. We know how to push through, we know how to survive the long road. We've been shaped by it, and in some cases, genuinely defined by it. Those qualities are real, but they can anchor identity to the struggle itself, so that when life offers something without the usual friction, it doesn't feel like alignment. It feels like a threat to the story. Who am I if this doesn't cost me anything? the mind searches for the catch. If it can't find one, it manufactures one, and does so convincingly enough that the manufactured obstacle feels entirely legitimate.
Which brings it to the question that actually cuts through the pattern. Not, am I working hard enough, but which parts of what I'm doing move things forward, and which parts exist so that I can say that I'm working hard? The second category tends to be larger than expected. These activities survive not because they're effective, but because they feel respectable. They allow forward motion while keeping the outcome safely out of reach.
So, what does it look like to interrupt this? The first move is noticing the moment complexity gets added and being specific about it. Not a general sense that things are getting complicated, but the actual decision point, the extra strategy layer, the additional research pass, the contingency built for a problem that hasn't appeared. Catching it there and asking honestly whether it's solving something real or just restoring a familiar level of difficulty. Most of the time, that question answers itself.
The second is being willing to state the desire plainly, without strategy wrapped around it, without conditions that need to be met first. Just, this is what I want. That kind of directness carries exposure, which is exactly why it gets avoided. The qualification and contingency that normally surrounds a desire isn't caution. It's the ego keeping the commitment at a manageable distance.
And the third is letting results count as information. If something is working, if momentum is building, if the path is clearing, if the quality of what you're making is rising, that's data worth respecting. The instinct is to distrust it, to stay on alert, to find where the difficulty must be hiding. But ease in motion isn't a warning sign, it's what alignment tends to feel like when it's actually present rather than theorized about.
The Taoists describe this as wu wei, action that follows the natural direction of a clear intention rather than fighting against it. Not passive, not careless, just no longer at war with its own momentum. The concept isn't about doing less, it's about effort that moves with the grain of what you actually want rather than across it. When the resistance that was doing that internal management work dissolves, something practical shifts. Attention sharpens, decisions become easier to evaluate because the noise that was surrounding them drops away. And the effort that remains carries direction instead of weight. The work doesn't disappear, it just stops justifying itself constantly.
Complexity was never proof of worth, it was protection. From committing fully to what you wanted, from the vulnerability of receiving it sooner than the story said you should. When that protection becomes unnecessary, something quiets. Now, this isn't because the work disappears, it's because the work finally knows where it's going. And the part of you that was managing the distance steps aside. Ease was never the absence of seriousness. It was always what creation looks like when the ego stops standing between you and what you actually came here to make.
If this conversation landed, share it with someone who thinks carefully about how they create. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring ideas like this, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Until next time, think differently, dream boldly, and create consciously.